We're in Mark chapter 10, verses 1 to 12, and this is a very interesting chapter, or certainly this part of it is. Man has been, and when I say man, I mean mankind, meaning men and women, has been rationalizing his or their behavior before God for one reason. When you rationalize something, you can say, well, the reason why I did this was that I was actually trying to do it for the help of the children in my neighborhood. When in effect, you were doing it for yourself.
Excuses.
You're making this rationalization so that other people will think more highly of you than really you deserve to be treated. So, man wants to do what man wants to do. We would say that's part of the fallen nature, the human nature. Man doesn't start out saying, oh, how can I help my neighbor? How can I help they may say, how can I help my family? But then we've also seen plenty of families where they're divided up. And it's not the way God intended it to be, and it certainly isn't a help to the other family. Mankind, he's always wanted to find a loophole, I think you all know what that means, that will allow him to get as close to sin as possible and still be connected to God. It is the very nature of fallen man to want to do that. How close can I get to the edge of the cliff and I don't want to fall off, but how close can I get? Why would you want to do that? I want to be back in the car. I don't want to be close to the edge of the cliff. A child in school knows that the rules prohibit running in the halls. Right? Do you recall that from your childhood at all? The vice principal, normally the poor soul, is the one that stood out there in the hallways to monitor what was going on at the change of classes. So the child says, I know I'm not supposed to run, but I want to get there faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip very fast. And so when he gets stopped, and the principal says, there's no running in the halls. He says, but did I say the assistant principal? He says, well, I wasn't running. I was skipping. That's called rationalizing your answer.
Wow. That's called playing with semantics.
Yeah, that's right. That's playing with words. Mankind has never stopped this kind of behavior. It started in the very beginning of mankind, and we're still doing it today. Jesus addresses an issue that could be for us today, as well it was at the time for these folks. They had a few different cultural differences, which you're going to see in a minute. Because the reason why it could be for today is that it revolves around figuring out a way to seemingly follow Jesus, but in our own way to follow Jesus, not in his way. So you can walk around like this with the invisible halo over your head, and you can pretend that you're holy and whatever, but in reality, if you're trying to do this your way, and or for some churches, they should have a time clock. When you come in, you punch your time card. Okay, I was there. God, did you see that I punched a time card? Okay, I was there. And I was there so many times per month or so many times per year or whatever. As if God cares about your presence there when you're not there with your heart involved. When you're there because you're trying to fulfill some rule. Okay.
About fulfilling that rule is about having your heart and love in Jesus.
Yeah, it's about having that love in your heart. That's right. Lest we forget the law of Moses, in the law of Moses, we're talking about not only just the 10 Commandments that on the tablets of stone that he brought down from Mount Sinai after being up there for 40 days. I guess God is a slow writer. It didn't take 40 days just to do that, but there were 600 and some odd other laws for the life of the Jews, because up to this point, when Moses went up the mountain, they did everything, whatever seemed right to them, they did it. There were no, well, I know this is wrong, or I know this is right. I mean, quite honestly, I think that's an excuse, because God gives us that word, that thing that we have within us that starts with a C. Conscience. God has given us a conscience. And that conscience speaks to us internally very clearly and says, you know, this is not helpful for you to be here. This is not helpful for you to be doing this. And you, once again, it's up to you as to whether you follow your conscience. The conscience doesn't have to be a cricket.
What's that?
Did you? You got it.
Jiminy.
Jiminy Cricket.
Oh.
Pinocchio. Remember, he'd say, just let your conscience be your guide. I know I'm old, but come on. You've shown that to your grandkids, I'm assuming.
There's a book called The Abolition of Man, and at the end of it, it has the cultural guidelines from societies and places in the world, different parts of the world, different times in the world, and guess what?
What?
They almost all exactly the same. It's, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Well, unless we forget the law of Moses, which we just talked about, that was so revered by the Jews, was given to them. God didn't give that law to the whole world. He gave it to his people, Israel, not for us as followers of Jesus. So we as we were reminded by Andy Stanley, not Andy Rivera, as we were reminded, it is very possible for us to get so involved in the Old Testament, and like we're reading these Psalms, for instance, that sometimes we're scratching our head about, like, we're going into battle and he's going to be there. And well, it can be a spiritual battle. It doesn't have to necessarily be a physical battle. At the time, King David was going into a physical battle. At a time, King Saul was chasing after him, right? He wanted to kill him because he knew that David was going to be the heir to the throne. And he was not in his right self anyway. So we can learn a lot from the law about God himself. We can know what God thinks about a lot of things by studying the actions of what he's done. For instance, you know that when if you want to say, well, I don't know, my uncle lives far away, and I really don't know him too well. I just know what I've heard, and maybe besides what I've heard, the times that I have seen him, I've watched his actions, because guess what? Actions speak louder than what? Words. So no matter what somebody says, if their actions don't match their words, then guess what? Their words are meaningless. It's the actions that are so important. So Jesus was in a very unique position. He was bringing an end to the old covenant, what we would say the Old Testament is another word for covenant. I don't think using the word contract is a good word, but it is a covenant, an agreement that God made. Okay, he was bringing that old covenant to an end. to an end for the Jews, as well as what he was saying was, I'm going to bring something completely new onto the scene. Completely new that's going to not just favor my people, but that something new, that new covenant, that new agreement is going to be for the whole world. So that's why that John 3:16 means so much, because it says, for God so loved the world. Not just for God so loved the Jews. God so loved the world that he sent his only Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish, but would have eternal life. So it's obvious that this new covenant was going to be all-inclusive for everyone. And I know that even when we listen to some very conservative Jewish people today, they still love to follow the Jewish traditions and culture, and they have their Shabbat, which is their Saturday, what we would call the Sabbath, Saturday, and have their Shabbat dinner and follow all of those rules and so forth. But again, it depends on what your intentions are, right? Okay, so let's turn to Mark 10. Well, it's funny that he should mention Matthew, because I have down here Matthew's interpretation of the same.
19, 1 through 9.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to see if I can read this without my glasses.
I made it bigger.
No, I mean my Bible. This I can read just fine. Okay, so 10. Oh, the title of this is Marriage and Divorce.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Then he, meaning Jesus, arose from there, where he just was, and came in the region of Judea, which is to the south, by the other side of the Jordan. And and not that it matters to you one iota, but geographically, we have the Sea of Galilee, which is a larger body of water that's fresh water, and then the Jordan River flows out of that and flows all the way down until it gets down to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea, of course, is 22% salt. I mean, it's so full of salt that when I walked into the water, and you know how you take a step, you put your foot out, my leg would float up to the surface before I could even take a step. That's how. So I would say that you don't need a life preserver in the Dead Sea, because you're not going to drown. So he rose from there and he came to Judea by the other side of the Jordan, and multitudes gathered to him again. This has been ongoing for him. Usually it was around the Sea of Galilee, but now it's everywhere he goes. And as he was accustomed, he taught them. He taught them again. It's important for the people to hear, just like it is today. It's important that people hear the truth. And I'm talking about the truth as the source of the truth is the Bible. Because if I get up here and I give you my opinion, remember my saying is, everybody has an opinion like everybody has a belly button. So we've all got an opinion. It doesn't make your opinion better than my opinion. It's your opinion. But when the Word of God tells us the truth, and we base our living on the truth, then we're in good company, because lots and lots of people have done that.
Amen.
So he was accustomed to teaching them, and he taught them things. He taught them things that they were astonished to hear, because first of all, the majority of the crowds that he's talking to today, we have for the most part, we have people that have at least basic education and they can read and write and do whatever. These people, not so much. If they were workers in the fields and whatever, they may not even know how to read and write. So everything that they learn because of the verbal teaching of somebody. And so here he is teaching them things that were seemingly going against what they had always been taught by the Jewish religious leaders, teachers of the law, and also the two, I won't call them political parties, but the high-ranking Jews of the day were either in the class called the Pharisees or the Sadducees. And there was a distinct difference between the two because the Sadducees didn't believe in life after death. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in anything, the spiritual realm. Whereas the Pharisees believed in all of those things. And so, anyway, so the Pharisees came and they asked him, because wherever Jesus goes, it's kind of like what do they call those people who go around taking pictures of all the celebrities? Paparazzi. Okay, the Pharisees were not there to take pictures because, paparazzi doesn't feel good or bad about the person they're taking the picture of. They just want to take the picture and sell it to some magazine. But the Pharisees had a different agenda. The Pharisees, they knew their scriptures inside and out, and they liked the fact that they could stand there with their chest puffed out and say, "We're better than you," without even having to say the words. And so they saw Jesus as a threat because everything Jesus taught about was seemingly against what they had been teaching the people for a long, long time, because they were into control. They wanted to control people. So the Pharisees dogged him. They were on him like white on rice. They were always there, trying to catch him and making a mistake. The same way they do it here. And, nowadays, you don't have to catch somebody in a mistake. All you have to do is take out one little clip of what they said, take it out of context, and put it on the air, and it makes it sound like you said something you really didn't say. But here's the Pharisees. They came to him and they asked him this question. Not because they wanted the answer to the question, because they already knew the answer to the question. But they wanted to see what he would say. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? Testing him is what they were doing. Is it lawful to do it? And so Jesus said, verse 3, and he answered and he said to them, what did Moses command you? Now, this is Mark's version. And here's what Matthew 19, 1-4 says. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and all reasons? In other words, are there any exceptions? Or can she burned the tortillas, so therefore you're out of here. I'm going to write this letter of divorce, and you're going to be out looking for another place. The sad part about it is that when you were divorced, gosh, when I grew up, a woman being divorced was a real stigma, right? That was a hard. It was kind of like. It was whispered. That woman got divorced.
Really unusual.
Yeah, it was very unusual.
But if you don't have one, you're a stigma.
Yeah. So, is it lawful for a man? This is what Mark says. Verse 4. Well, Jesus said, what did Moses command you? Interesting choice of words. Verse 4. They said, Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and to dismiss her. The way the law was at the time, that if you were unhappy with your wife, whatever, maybe it was like she was barren. She couldn't have children. And for a Jew not to have children, not to mention not to have a son to carry on the name, was terrible. And so if you were barren, or as the Bible sometimes says, and the Lord closed her womb, or the Lord opened her womb, making it possible for her to have children, then this could be one of the reasons. Because that's why I said, for any and all reasons, you just get, you have maybe they had a whole book of these certificates with, glued together where you could just tear them off as you got rid of your wife and fill out and put their name, give it to her and say, okay,
You're out of here.
don't let the door hit you in the backside on the way out. Terrible. Terrible, because women, look at, I know this is hard for ladies to understand this, but we look at what's going on in Iran and Iraq and Middle Eastern countries where the women are walking, 5 paces or 10 paces behind their husband. That's the way things were. That has not changed there, but it's definitely changed here. If it hadn't have been for Jesus coming on the scene, it would still be that way.
Amen.
It would still be that way. So you had the man at the top, the woman down below him, and the children even further below. So the women had no rights whatsoever, and neither did the kids.
So I guess the conscience must have not been that loud in their ear.
No, evidently, or they had just tossed that aside. So Jesus has already said, what did Moses command? He says he permitted a man to write the certificate of divorce. Didn't have to go to a lawyer. Verse 5, and Jesus answered and said to them, because of the hardness of your what? Heart. He wrote you this precept. It was because man's heart was hard. It was because man didn't believe in till death do us part, and there's nothing we can't work out together. There was none of that. It was just if the man was unhappy, that wife became an object that he owned, and he could exchange, get rid of, move on to the next one. But then Jesus continues. But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Interesting. See, when you go to the Bible for your truth, that's what you hear.
Amen.
God created them male and female.
That's Genesis 1:27.
Verse 7, for this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then there are no longer two, but one flesh. So what Jesus is saying is, in the beginning, God's plan was that there would be man and woman, and they would be joined together. The man would leave his family, and it doesn't, well, it was a given, but at the time, it was a given the woman's going to go with the man. The man is going to leave his family with his mother and father, and he's going to create a new family with his wife. And he said that's the way, and they would become one flesh, one person. Have you ever, that's kind of probably a lousy example, but if you've ever glued two things together, I've seen it with 2 pieces of wood glued together, and you say, oh, I made a mistake, and you start to pry it apart. It tears the fibers of the wood off. The glue's still there, but it's tearing. It's violent. It's hurtful. That's what divorce is. Anybody that's been through it knows. That's not something that you can haphazardly do. It's not an easy thing. It is very harmful. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. That was what Jesus had to say. Let me see how far I'm at. Okay. So when they got to the house that they were in, and who knows where we're at now, his disciples also asked him again about the same matter. In other words, these disciples, even though they've committed themselves and they're following Jesus, they've been raised in the Jewish culture. And they know what they've been taught. The boys got to go to Hebrew school. The girls did not. If you watch that movie, I think it's Yentl, Barbra Streisand movie, where she would pull her hair back and make herself look like a boy so she could go buy books from the peddler. That's no exaggeration. The women were supposed to be home and making babies and cooking the food, and the men were supposed to be the ones that were going to be educated in what the scriptures had to say. So after their bar mitzvah, after they turned of age. So he's got his disciples in the house with him, and he knows what they want to know, and so he makes it crystal clear. So he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband, so in other words, it could happen the other way around, where the woman actually goes for the divorce and marries another, she commits adultery. That's where that stops. He's just saying, this is what you're asking me. What does the law say? What is the position that you're in when you do this? Given the law, if you want to live according to just what the law says, then brother, you have to adhere to every little sentence, every little statement. You can't say, I'm at the buffet, so I'll take a little of this truth, but I don't like this one about divorce, so then I'll take this one. You can't do that. Jesus he's not trying to condemn everybody that divorces to say you're committing adultery, but he's saying this is what the law says. So you make up your mind. You make up your mind what you want to do. Of course, like I said, the Bible is a source of great truth, so we can know how God feels. God feels that he really does not want anybody to take marriage so lightly that you would marry a person and there's a period of time you go through where, if you're buying a car, they call it buyer's remorse. You know what I mean? You buy the car. There's actually a law. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's a 72-hour waiting period. You buy anything, but especially a larger item like a car or whatever, you have 72 hours to say, within, say, the first 48 hours, you decide, I really don't like this car. You can take it back to them. They put that within the law so that people wouldn't be so manipulated by the car salesman that they spray that new car smell inside your used car so it'll smell good. And you get in that car and you say, oh man, I love this car. And later on you decide, no, it's a two-seater and I got 8 kids. This is not going to work. I think I need an Escalade, or I need a van, or I need something, but this little car ain't going to get it.
Midlife crisis.
Yeah, midlife crisis. Bruce Stern. Is that his last name? Good movie. Very good movie. Old movie. So the Lord, this is all about the new thing that he's bringing on the scene. He's saying to these, and he hasn't in so many words said that right here, but he's, the old ways, the old covenant. Okay, let me say this to you. Suppose you have a set of rules that you're using with your kids at home or your grandkids. And we have certain ones when our grandkids were small. We had certain things. You don't eat in the living room. We have a kitchen table. That's where you eat. You're going to spill. You're a kid. The accidents are going to happen. So to try to prevent that, we eat at the table. And then when you're done at the table, then we'll go in and watch TV or whatever, play your game or whatever you're going to do. Okay. That rule is the rule of the house. And guess what? When the little kid knows that when he goes home, he can jump on the couch like a trampoline. He can wander throughout the house, eating cookies, spilling his soda and whatever, or drinking soda in the first place. And it's going to be okay. But it's like when they go to grandma's house, they have to go like this. Okay, I'm at grandma's house now. Different set of rules. Were they upset about that? Probably not. Did they try to manipulate grandma and grandpa to do what they wanted to do? Sure. But as long as you were consistent about what you believed in, those kids rolled with it. It was no big deal. They just knew that was the rule. Well, there were a whole set of rules and guidelines. Like I said, over 600 laws, which, by the way, a lot of those rules are still in our system of common law today. It was an agricultural society. So if your neighbor's cow wandered onto your property and stumbled into a hole and broke its leg, it wasn't something you did intentionally. But it was there was certain liability. That's why we have liability insurance today. So that when somebody comes over to your house and they slip on the ice on your front porch and fall down and really crack themselves good, there's a certain, depending on who it is that did it, there's a certain kind of feeling of liability if you're going to have people come over. You salt your sidewalk or you do whatever. So that's those old rules, those old laws. They served their purpose. They were fine for the time. It gave them something to live by. But a lot of them, people are clinging to those. Clinging to those. Instead of clinging to God, they're clinging to these rules and regulations. Thinking, if I can obey these, then God's going to be so impressed with me. But guess what? There is no way that any of those Jews, or even modern day Jews, could ever keep all those laws. It's impossible. And that was part of the plan. God's plan was, you need me because you ain't going to be able to cut this. You're not going to be able to follow this. If you're trying to impress me with your ability to keep rules, you're going to fall at some point, and you're going to be kind of depressed. You're going to be kind of down. I was doing so well. But God is saying, if you depend on me, I'll forgive you when you fall, and I'll help pick you up and get you back on track. And I expect you to do the same thing with the people that you know. Don't give them. Don't make those people. There's a great story in the Bible, right, where the guy owed I don't know what it was, like $1 million to his boss, and the boss went to him and said, "Hey, I've been carrying this loan for a long time, and it's really and you're not making any real effort. So you either pay me back what you owe me right now, or I'm going to throw you into debtor's prison. And there was such a thing, and it was for a long, long time. There was a debtor's prison, even in England. And he said, "Oh, but please have mercy on me. I'll repay you everything. Just give me more time." In other words, throwing yourself on the mercy of your boss. And in the story, the boss said, "Okay, since you've shown me that you really, really see the significance of this, I'm going to forgive you the debt. In other words, you don't have to pay me back." So he's all excited. He rushes out and he goes over to this friend of his that owes him $10. He's just been forgiven $1 million. He goes to his friend that owes him $10 and he says, "Hey, where's my $10? Could have even been $5. And he says, "Well, please be patient with me because I have no, I'll pay you back, but I don't have the money to do that." Right? Here's the good one, right? "I'm waiting for my tax return to come back. When I get my tax refund, when I get my stimulus check, then I'll give you back the $5. And you know what? He said, No, I don't forgive you the debt." And I can't remember whether he throws him in
Yeah,
jail
put in prison.
or whatever he did. Now here's the best part of this story. Now the boss, his original boss, hears this. Now, this is in the Bible. I'm paraphrasing a lot, but his boss finds out about it through the grapevine. I'm sure there were a lot of other co-workers that said, "Hey, remember that guy that you forgave the debt? Well, guess what? He just threw somebody in jail for like $10." And so he calls the guy, not on his cell phone. He probably sent one of his servants over. Go get Billy Ray, bring him over here. So Billy Ray comes over and he says, "What's this I hear? Did you actually throw somebody in jail for owing you $10 and I forgave you $1 million? And he just, I can't remember what he actually did, but he did. He'd already forgiven him the debt, but he just wanted to make the guy realize what he had just done. What if you're in a situation where you are in the same kind of thing, where there's a debt or there's something, we're really taught to not, if you're going to be in debt like that, make it your sole ambition to get that debt paid off. Don't let it slide because you know that person can afford to do it or whatever. The whole point is it's a debt that you have. So anyway, here's the old covenant. It's got all kinds of, and that's anyway, I have to look it up. Because we were going to it all the time, so I had it kind of almost memorized. Including in the laws, there were promises and curses. And this is the old covenant. This is God saying, if you will obey me, in other words, if you won't go out of your way to do what I really, I don't want you to do. If you will, like seek me first and do these things, and don't worship any other gods. In other words, don't let anything get in your way of you worshiping me and seeing me as the sole God in your life, sole creator. Then I will protect you from your enemies. I will give you the rainfall and the 2 times a year that was needed for the crops to grow. And when the crops do grow, you're not just going to get 5 bushels per acre. You're going to get 100 bushels per acre. And if you have goats and lambs and all of this, when they have babies, you're going to have 10 times what you normally would have. In other words, these promises it's kind of like Terrible. I mean, why would you walk away from that? But they did. They turned their backs on God, and they sometimes they married a non-Jewish girl who worshiped other gods, and they drew the husband away. Oh, please come and worship our God, and so they would go worship their gods. Or maybe they had no intention of ever stopping that, and they just continued to do it. And so then the curses came on. And the curses were everything from bodily things, that you would have sores and all kinds of physical ailments that would occur to you, but then also that your enemies would come and they would enslave you. They would drag you off to their country. This is exactly what happened with the Babylonians and the Assyrians. They came in and conquered them, drug them off. The only people that got left behind were the really old and really weak to kind of tend the fields. But anybody who was strong and had some ability, would have some ability to learn, they took them all off to Babylon. So that was all part of what happens when you turn your back on God. Okay? So, we have to, there's a fine line here between playing this game of legalism, where you believe that if you just follow this, okay, everybody, here's your set of rules, and you have to obey these rules, and if you obey these rules, then everything will be fine. Now, what Jesus is saying is, love me first, and then love your neighbor. And you don't need all these rules. Toss those out. Because if you're loving me and you're loving your neighbor as yourself, then you're not going to disobey these things. It's going to be something that you're not even going to think about doing. So Jesus had something that was so brand spanking new to people that he just it was hard for some of them to accept. You know how when somebody says to you, they call you on the phone and they say, do you want to upgrade your car insurance today? I must get 10 of those a day. Or I've got this thing to sell you. Pardon me, they don't say sell you. I have this thing and it's absolutely free. Absolutely free. Beware when you hear those words, absolutely free. Because there's nothing absolutely free. There used to be an expression, there's no free lunch. Sometimes Lowe's has a free lunch for the contractors, but other than that, there's no free lunch. There's nothing that is free. So here is how we've heard somewhat about what the old way was with marriage, but and how they viewed divorce. But here is the way that as followers of Jesus, this is the way we ought to look at marriage. In reality, a man and a woman together commit themselves to each other in God's presence. In other words, God is the witness. You're not only the witness, if you're going to make a promise or a covenant or a vow, and it is called vows, right? Marriage vows, that you have to be vowing to somebody. You don't bring Nicole in there and say, that's his dog. That's the other's little dog. We're going to make these vows to you, okay? And the dog goes, no. I'm the only woman in your life. And so he says, so you make a vow to God. You're saying to God, There's no one else that I can vow this to. You created marriage. You allowed divorce, but you created marriage. And God is our divine witness. God is, when you make a vow before God, what you're saying is, what do you say? So help me God. You used to say that in the courtrooms. I don't know if they do that anymore. You're going to give testimony in a court trial. Yeah, you put your hand on the Bible, kind of like Biden did, and you say, I vow to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. The vow is before God. Now they probably took God out of that too, but the whole point is, when you get married, it's a vow that you make before God. And He's the one that when you're and He's also the one you go to when you're struggling with your marriage and you say, Lord, please help me. Give me the strength to get through this, because she's perfect and I'm just such a putz. Maybe that's not what the man would say. As long as the man is happy, and the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Oh, see, you guys understand all this.
Only in the Coca Cook.
She can't. If she had thumbs, she could burp the can opener. As long as he's happy, he's going to remain married. That's just the normal way that people think. But a vow says, till death do us part. And that's really the only way to enter into matrimony. It's His way, and that should be our way.